All right. Well, let's try this again. It looks like we're live now. Welcome back. Technical difficulties. We are going to start the call where it ended. But Justin, welcome back. It's been about 5 minutes since I've seen you.
Yes.
We were just talking about land assemblages. We were talking about how I had originally reached out to you
Hmm.
on your South Seattle property. That I would have been 21 years old
Hmm.
because that's the age that I had bought that property, maybe just turned 22. And so what you were saying is that I called you about your property, you were living in it,
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah, it was a duplex house hack.
yeah, so you must have been my property neighbor.
Hmm.
And the objective from my end was to learn how you built your business, because that's what I did back then. And eventually it was the hope that you'd be in a position to want to work with me. And now we're working together on a different fashion because I wouldn't want to buy anything in South Seattle anymore. I since sold that property.
Yeah.
But my goal was to turn my sevenplex into, I guess, a 9 unit and then pick up. I met another guy named Kenny who owned a 4 unit. And so I was going to keep on stacking these units and do a big development as the zoning changed, as you were
Right.
mentioning. But
Yep.
what have you done in that space? You mentioned you like land assemblages. So you add a unit here, add a unit there, pick up the adjacent parcels. Is that something you're
Yeah.
doing right now?
I'm actively looking and talking to neighbors on different properties. As we were talking about it, and then we had the call drop. I was just thinking about because I own in Des Moines, Iowa, a 16plex, two eightplexes side by side, large lot, and there's at least it's probably 16 units next to me. I realized I haven't reached out to them. So they'd be a great candidate to reach out to. And who knows, maybe I want to sell, right? So you never know. You could either just help each other out because we've had issues with, random cars parking or people dropping garbage off. So you can either work together, you could support each other, you could buy each other out. So it's a huge and it's easier to call somebody. You already know a lot about them, right? Because you know the area, the clientele, the property, the issues that are going around with that property, and it gives you optionality in the future if you need help or if you want to scale up.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm doing right now, I don't know if you've looked at this, but I own a 7 unit and there's a bunch of side by side sevens. So I'm working on getting a few more creatively,
Hmm.
doing owner contracts and stuff, but you can't buy everything by yourself. So one thing I'm doing to do the land assemblage is when a deal pops up, I find a partner to take it down
Hmm.
and then have a path to buy them out later. Is that
Right.
something that you're looking at? Like if you could buy another 16 unit by yours, would you take on a partner or would you only do that by yourself if you could?
I would say partners last resort. I kind of scaled up, had multiple partners. It becomes cumbersome, in terms of time management and control. I'm a big control guy. You have less control, obviously, with that. I love your idea of the buyout option. Uh, I'm assuming they coming in as debt or equity partners in your scenario?
If they're a partner, they'd be coming in as equity. If
Hmm.
they just want to return, they'd be lending the money as debt.
And then you have like a 1.5x, in 2 years, or what's kind of the typical buyout ratio you use?
It's usually driven by how much time is involved.
Hmm.
So if it's a 5 year thing, what I've typically opted for is if they put in 100, I write them a check for two,
Hmm. That's
and
awesome.
they share cash flow, and that's where people that I've worked with and know, and it's a return that they're happy with.
Hmm.
So I mean, it might be a little higher return than what a lot of people pay, but as long as the deal pays for it, I'm happy that people are getting a good return.
Exactly. Everyone wins, and then it's amazing. Like once you start giving the money back, then they're like, now what, right? Now what? So, because I have two private money lenders that I've done a couple projects with, and it's like they're about to get all their money back. And so it's like, okay, I got to find more projects to do, right? To keep that money active. I'm not sure if you run into this scenario, right? Because like if you're not keeping it active, they go to somebody else or they buy something themselves. So if the more you keep it in play, getting them the return that they're looking for, the more deal flow that you can participate in.
Money seems to go where it's treated best. So if you treat it the best, it'll stick around you.
Exactly. The easier you make it for them, the higher the probability of having a return lender or partner.
Yeah, don't put them through a million steps.
Exactly. Um, just to kind of further the conversation on assemblage, um, sometimes you can do this by, slowly but surely acquiring by yourself. But one of the properties, or I should say, assemblages I had, or still have, is this was a Facebook lead where I live in Seattle, the property is in Milwaukee. It was a
Mhm.
Facebook lead. Every time I would fly into Milwaukee, the goal is I'd take a red eye Thursday night, fly in Friday morning, get a rental car, and go to the properties, buy the property, whatever I was doing. On the way back to the airport, I would try to schedule meetings with sellers. And so I ended up meeting with the seller. Come to find out, I meet him at that property. On that street behind, there's, more houses, right? Turns out he owns four houses on the street over. Then he owned two on the other street. So he had like seven properties right here. And so I was like, oh, wow, maybe we can come to find an agreement on all these. We ended up not coming to terms on the deal. He had one like really bad property, and I'm like, hey, if you want me to take that, like, we got to lower the average because I didn't want it. It was just a problem property.
Yeah.
Uh, so he ended up not selling to me at the time. But every time I'd come into town, I'd meet up with him. We'd go have a drink at the bar. And then he ultimately sold a couple. I ended up buying four of them from him. So three are right next to each other, and then one
That's
is
nice.
two over, right? And he was yeah, ended up seller financing those. Let's see, I think I did those were on a lease option. So
Mm.
effectively a low down payment, because he had super low interest on these, like 3.5%, if I remember right. So we did that. I had a 5-year option, and ultimately I 1031 and ended up just outright buying them. But now I have all these properties side by side in an area, and it's kind of nice. The more that you have in an area, it helps scale things up for you.
Yeah, you control that neighborhood. Are you going to
Exactly.
continue buying up that neighborhood if they list a house, even if it's a little more than you want?
Yeah, I think so because it's what I've noticed is that so I have a property manager out there, and because I'm not a big fan of self-managing, at least today.
Mhm.
And when they're out there for at doing something on the property, they're gonna see the other properties, right? So it's like, hey, I was at this property and I noticed too and that the grass is high. The tenants, typically we have the tenants, there's a reduction in rent for, them taking care of the yard work, right? So then they're out there looking at one property, effectively they can see an issue at another property and address it all at the same time. So there's some benefits of having an assemblage.
Yeah. And I haven't done it with the residential stuff in a while. One of my very early on deals, I think it was my sixth purchase, was three side by side duplexes.
Mhm.
And I will say, I mean, I love doing the assemblages on big apartments or I guess mid-sized apartments, but
Mhm.
duplexes, if you can get a whole bunch of side by side duplexes, it's really stress free. It was for me anyway. I didn't
Mhm.
have a lot of maintenance requests. I didn't have a lot of tenant issues. It's a lot easier. It was back then because I don't own it anymore. I sold it to buy other stuff,
Mhm.
but it was a lot easier to manage than the land assemblages I put together for apartments.
Right.
Would
That's
you have the same sentiment on that, or would you want to just do land assemblages with apartments? Because you got your 16 unit, the 2/8, and that's awesome.
mhm.
But would you rather have eight duplexes side by side?
What I'm kind of in this like barbell method right now, to be honest with you. So like I like, for example, the two eighplexes side by side. I'd love I think it's 16 or more next to me. That would be one option. So the barbell is like extremes, right? So next to my multifamilies get larger multifamily, right? But then specifically that one I was telling you about in Milwaukee, there's three single families. So what I've noticed in these C-class areas that I've actually been doing much better in the last couple of years on just these single family tenant properties versus my 2 through 4 units I've had. It seems like, effectively one person at least turns over every year. Now in these single families, well, just like they sound, it's more of a family base. They want to stay there long term. And I'm really enjoying the average tenancy on these to where, so of those properties I bought, there were three in the row. Um, two people lived in there for, gosh, almost 4 years,
Mhm.
right? And then one is still the original one. Yeah,
Wow.
so gosh, I don't know, was that 5 or 6 years now? So the big thing that I'm learning, the longer I'm in this, is, the length of tenancy is super it's where the profitability is at because one of these buildings I bought also in Milwaukee, it's a 16 unit. It's two eight plexes side by side. And man, we are turning over constantly. So in October, we're fully occupied. Since October to today, we had 25% turnover. And, these run 2 to 5K, right? So that's another 15, 20K in unit terms, right? The average tenancy of the ones that were there was maybe a year. Some were like 6 months. They move in 3 months and then they get behind and you gotta evict them. So it's like, either you have to have a lot of scale to offset
Mhm.
the vacancy, or you have these single families where people just want to stay there longer. And that's kind of where I've been kind of trending out. So now, if I could get duplexes side by side, I would do that. That's probably more of a Washington play. But what I've noticed out of state is kind of barbell, single family or larger multifamily. Not the in between. I've been having turnover issues.
Yeah, I really like how Dion portrays his portfolio of he'll get multifamily, but he wants the small multifamily that looks and feels like a single family.
Right.
So your independent backyards. So I still love a lot of my apartments. Some of them I
Hmm.
hate, but I love most of them. However, my wife and I are pushing into townhomes because it's a little bit easier of a project to manage, and
Hmm.
tenants do live there longer. They live there for a few years rather than, like you mentioned, a few months. I've had people that'll rent for me. They only want to stay there for 6 months or 12 months because it's a little apartment.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah,
definitely resonate on that.
one thing I like what you're doing, and this is what I'm realizing as I get older and want to, enjoy the finer things of life, travel being one. The consistency is huge, right? So to get consistent tenants over time, typically you have to have a better asset, meaning a newer asset, a nicer asset. So as you're getting into these, whether you're building them or buying them relatively new, I'm looking at doing that myself. So as I 1031, I'm trying to get, because most of my stuff in Milwaukee is literally over 100 years old, right? So
That's
if I can
yeah,
get
that's ancient.
into, yeah, I know. And I have one that's 150 years old. It's like 1863. It's literally like if you go into the basement, it feels like you're in the bottom of a wooden boat, right? Because like the piers aren't even square. They're like round logs down in the basement. So but yeah, I want to move up into higher quality assets because that'll decrease my turnover.
Yeah, love it. You got a question from Flavio in the chat. That's one of our first questions on our lives, so we
I
made it.
love it.
What kind of calculator do you guys use to calculate a multifamily property? Do you include 5% vacancy?
Mhm. So I'll go first and you can go. So for me, it's actually, I got it off of Bigger Pockets probably in 2017. It's pretty basic. And, depending on the size, you just drop in how many units are in there, what are the rents per unit to get the total rent. Then for me, what I'm using I usually use higher in Milwaukee. I'm using 8%. So the thought there is that if somebody moves out, they move out, you fix it up, put it back on the market and rent it. It's at least 1 month. One divided by 12, I think is like 8.3. So I've been using 8% there. Now, locally in Washington, my turnover here is, most of my tenants are multi-year tenants. So I think I have 3% in my Washington ones. And then from there, you're just load all the expenses in there. And then, usually when I buy it, what I've noticed is a lot of these, the landlord's paying them. So then I do a actual, and then I do a separate one where it's a pro forma, or then I look at, okay, I'm going to do rubs, bill back for the utilities, and then so I can see what is that today, what is it going to be at in the future, so can I increase the value, specifically on these multifamilies, is as you increase the NOI, you increase the value of the property.
Yeah. And on the vacancy piece, the hard part about the vacancy, so he also mentions the local seller is asking 1.8 million for a 12 unit, but not including vacancy or maintenance and manager fee. The problem with those metrics is let's say you have 5% vacancy. So 5%, if you have a 12 unit as an example, 5% of the time, a unit's always going to be empty. Well, if you're budgeting, if the rents are 1,000 a month, that's $50 a unit, $600 a month. You're budgeting. When you actually have that empty and you don't get that income, there's also the turn expense that falls into that because of the vacancy that a lot of people aren't correctly budgeting for. And on the PM fee, there's a lot of managers that'll say, well, we'll manage for 8%, but we also have lease up fees. We've also got renewal fees. We've got inspection fees. And so while you might budget 8%, your realized cost is closer to 11 to 12%. And I
Mhm.
had that issue. My manager was saying, we're only charging you 6.5%, but the actual cost at the end of the year was 12 and a half. It was almost double because I had a high turnover property that had a lot of lease up fees, renewal fees. And so I restructured all of my properties to be 9% flat, no other fees. But
Oh, that's a great idea.
and you have to incentivize like everything so that everybody wins. In
Mhm.
that old model, the only person who was winning was my manager. They were making more money than I was consistently. And now we're both making a similar amount of money, which is funny because Dion says your property manager will probably make the same, if not more profit than you, at least on the early
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because like I actually have a property management meeting at 9 for my Milwaukee property manager. So we're starting to analyze, because 2025 is done. Now I can pull the reports, look at actual spend, and some are like I literally don't even know I own them because it's just like steady Eddie, nothing happens. Love them, right? But that 16 unit, we're like, we are literally meeting every week and figuring out like, how are we going to lower the costs? How are we going to keep the people in there? And then the simple things of like, hey, these people that you're putting in, like one of them paid 2 months and then was 2 months behind and left, something like that. So I'm like I'm not giving you, I should get a free lease up fee on the next one. Like if you're consistently putting in bad tenants, like I shouldn't have to pay, it's like you're saying they're not incentivized to get great tenants. They're incentivized obviously to fill it because they get paid. So I like that idea of a flat rate. The one thing that I'm also running into, and maybe you can clarify this, is that over time, what I see is as these property managers scale up, they then to start with, they hire everything out. Then they're like, hey, if I do this myself, I can save money, right?
Mhm.
So then they have a couple guys and then more and more. Then they end up having too many guys, and then magically you're getting stuff fixed for no reason. And you're just like, why are you guys doing this, So that's one thing to watch is like great comment on what you're actually spending because you need to like for me, this is what I'm starting to push back on is like, why are we doing these things? Like, there's no reason that we should be paying for these and these should be fixed by the tenant without you going out there or billed back to the tenant at a minimum.
Yeah, and sometimes it's an education piece for the manager because managers don't always own real estate. My property manager, they're actually starting to do a great job, but it's been a lot of it's been a work in progress.
Hmm.
I've had to get an understanding of them. They've definitely had to get an understanding of the property side. And sometimes they just don't know how things work. They said, "Hey, your toilet valve's broken." You know, the little thing you can screw on and off
Yeah.
by the floor. And there was no water flowing in the toilet. And I turned it off and turned it on. And sure enough, there was no water. I was like, shoot. So I picked off the top piece, and the little floaty that determines
Yeah.
the water level was stuck. It was all
Yep.
crusty and it was stuck. So I just pushed it down and jiggled it, and then it was fully functional again. But I sent him a video, and it's like, that's not a problem anymore. We can just tell the tenant, jiggle this, which takes 3 seconds, and we don't have to send a plumber because they wanted to send a plumber. I said, no way. That
Yeah.
would have been dumb.
Plumber, like I just had something like that. And it's like 200 bucks, 300 bucks, and they're just unclogging something, right? So like same thing. Usually I get the notice, right? And then they're like, hey, this happened with this property. I'm like, have you talked to the tenant to see if they can fix it? No. Okay. Have you gone to YouTube, look for the video, and then send it to them? Because like yeah, I have a bunch of properties that have these cadet heaters in them.
Yeah.
All the time they need to be reset. It's literally like 5 seconds, right? Depending on the style you got, you can literally just push, I recommend like a chopstick because it's wood versus like something metal. But literally just push the reset button, boom, kicks back on, right? Versus hiring an electrician, probably 150, 200 bucks just for them to come out and literally be there for like less than 5 minutes.
Yeah. You got to protect your money. No one else is gonna. Tenant's not gonna protect your money. Your manager's not gonna protect your money.
Right.
It, you have to do it. So, I mean, that's no fault on them. It's just they're in business to make money, and so are you. So, you
Yep.
got to find ways for you to make money. We got another question. This is
Mhm.
our most active live.
Loving it.
When building up, would you recommend targeting 6 to 20 unit apartments, townhomes and assemblage of smaller units or buildings, for the townhomes and smaller unit assemblages, or are the townhomes and smaller unit assemblages better when building out? Well, from my experience, I started with the 6 to 20 unit deals. So I bought a 12, then I bought a 12, then I bought a six, and then I scaled. That's what I did in the beginning. That's how I built a lot of my net worth and cash flow. And net worth doesn't pay the bills, but you can borrow against it. And that is something I did to scale. So I like the small to mid-sized apartments when getting started, but then shifting those equities, like Justin mentioned, 1031 into some nicer, newer, uh, better quality assets.
Hmm.
What are your
I,
thoughts on
I,
that?
yeah, I mean, if I could redo it, I was there's probably a time, let's see, 2017. It was probably like 19. I was just on a spree of buying duplexes. I never scaled. I scaled from volume of transactions, not size, right, of
Yeah,
transactions. So in hindsight, that's what I should have done. Because like, and I think you've said this before in the past. Like, if I buy a duplex and you buy a 20 unit, we're probably spending roughly the same amount of time. We still got to call the lender. We still got to get insurance. Still got to talk to the property manager. All that is the same amount of time involved, right? But you're
yeah,
buying 20 and I'm buying two, right? So that's something in hindsight I would have changed is I could have levered my time better if I bought, less often, just bigger units.
yeah. You got to be careful where you let your time go because it'll get away from you.
Right.
And it does take the same amount of time to sign for a 20 unit. Actually, I will say this, signing for a property, if you're getting conventional mortgage, takes less time signing for a 20 unit than it does for a duplex. Residential loans are so much documentation.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know if you feel the same way, but I hate signing for residential loans.
Yeah, when I was doing I had a lot of these commercial loans, and they weren't even commercial properties. I was just what I knew at the time. I'd work with U.S. Bank. I literally would have three signatures. Boom, done. Like I would come in and it'd be like this. It'd be like a couple pieces of paper, and they're like, "Hey, sign these. Good to go." In and out. I would do it on my lunch break at Amazon. I'd walk to the U.S. Bank, sign in three signatures. I'd buy a property during lunchtime. It was that fast, right? Versus, otherwise you'd have like an inch. Like some of these lenders today with all the
Mhm.
rules and regulations, You're signing like 50 times, it seems like.
Yeah. 10 and 10 don't recommend. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, whichever property you can fit into, you get into, but man, I hate signing for those loans. Commercial loans, I'll sign like 10 things rather than 50. But
Right.
that said, I learned a new thing recently and I gotta go. I have a tenant who's behind, and the local college, since they're a student, is paying their back due rent. So I gotta go get a check. That's one of the properties that I self-manage.
That is awesome. Yeah, the and maybe that's a topic for a future discussion because there is so many things out there, whether it's nonprofit or city slash government sponsored, ways to get money to either plug the holes or help you develop in the right spaces. So um, that could be a good future topic because there's literally I got what 30,000 of free money if you
Hmm.
follow the rules that we can talk about in a future live.
Yeah, let's do it. All righty. Well, thanks for jumping on and for all the questions we got. There's more questions than we've ever had before. My buddy Anthony jumped on the live before we got cut off from tech troubles.
Yes.
But he was posting. He has his 12 unit Puyallup that's going pretty well. He got a $350 rental premium on his turn. That doesn't suck. So I will
Dang.
see. Oh yeah, right. That'll add up on 12 units.
Yeah.
I'll see you on